All right, folks, toss your old metrics out the window. On this episode of the Adelaide Show, we've got Marc Guldimann from Adelaide Metrics, the guy who's basically turning the advertising world upside down. Ever wonder how to measure media quality without falling asleep? Marc's got the answer, and it's a game changer. Plus, he might just reveal if he's rocking a Speedo or trunks this summer. Get ready for a no BS, straight-talking deep dive into the future of ads. Let's roll.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal powerhouse.
Welcome to the Adelaide Show, where we mix digital advertising insights with a twist, just like I like my whiskey. I'm your host, Pesach Lattin, serving up straight shots of wisdom, even if you don't want it. Today, we're cracking open the case of online metrics with Marc Guldimann, the brains behind Adelaide Metrics and the revolutionary attention unit. So crank it up and get ready to find out if Marc is the real deal or just another pretender in the wild jungle of digital ads. Marc, let's cut through the usual pleasantries. How are you really doing? Spare no detail.
I'm doing great. It's been a good start to the year. I'm looking forward. We're going down to Possible next week, so I'm excited to meet up with a lot of people face to face. But yeah, overall, things at Adelaide are going great. Things in New York, save the occasional earthquake, are going fantastic.
You got your swimsuits ready? Is it trunks or a bikini?
Don't think I'm swimsuit ready at 45 years old.
If you were a meme right now, which one would you be?
If I was a meme, oh man. Zach posted a really great meme. Zach Kubin, my co-founder, our VP of sales, posted a really great meme about MFA, which is the montage scene from the 80s movies about the cocaine dealers. Well, they were just making, raking in the money. So I don't know. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me about a meme. I don't know what meme I would be myself, though.
So every legend has their Yoda. Who's been whispering wisdom in your ear throughout your digital odyssey?
So I think that, I don't really have like a mentor, but there's a bunch of people that were super helpful when I was getting started in digital advertising. Folks like Steve Katelman, Jonah Goodhart, Mark McNeely. I've been doing startups in ad tech for probably 15 or 20 years now, and being able to rely on people who were sort of more senior in the industry to both give me advice, but also open doors and help me get started was invaluable.
So a few years ago, you introduced the revolutionary attention unit, and you put the old town sheriffs like CPM and viewability to shame. How does your shiny new badge compare to the old rusty ones?
So I think that we're really looking to improve on how the industry measures media quality. And today, metrics like viewability, video completion rate, and just treating all reach as the same haven't driven a lot of trust in the industry. And when buyers and sellers, they don't necessarily need to trust each other, but they need to trust the metrics that they use to measure each other. When they don't have that trust, you start to see a lot of dysfunction in the market. And what AU brings to the market, AU's our metric, is a more precise measure of media quality, which I think will reinvigorate the trust between buyers and sellers in the market. So really, AU is a measure of media quality. It's based in attention metrics. It's available in 95% of an advertiser's typical media spend, everything from digital out of home all the way through online video and cinema and digital audio and everything in between. So really what we're looking to do is to inject a metric that people can trust in the market and then drive more trust between buyers and sellers.
What rodeos did you have to ride through to get the industry buy-in on this new metric?
Yeah, so when we first got started, we really had to go directly to brand advertisers and explain to them why it was important to understand the quality of the media that was being procured on their behalf. Then, we started to work with smaller challenger agencies who weren't afraid to disrupt measurement. A lot of incumbents in any industry aren't interested in more scrutiny. So we really had to work our way first to brands, to challenger agencies. I think now we're really at this point where every agency of all shapes and sizes have attention programs, right? And they have some sort of strategic way of using attention to evaluate either media quality or creative quality or some other sort of aspect of their business.
In the early days, was there a point where a brand said, oh my goodness, this is amazing, when they had no idea how bad their marketing strategies were?
Yeah, there's been several instances of that. I mean, of course, I'm not going to call anybody out for having that realization. I think what
I'm sure there's a good story here. Come on, give us a little dirt.
Well, there's a positive angle on it, right? So previously, my co-founders and I were running an ad network called Parsec, where we were selling media on a cost per second. One of our biggest clients was Microsoft. And I went to a meeting up in their offices outside of Seattle, and they said, this stuff is really working great. Like this cost per second stuff is fantastic. We want to use this on most of our media. And I thought, wow, I'm going to have the biggest ad network ever. We're going to be selling everything using attention metrics. And they very quickly said, no, we want to understand how to measure all of the media that we're buying using this methodology and this approach. And that was sort of the genesis of the measurement business we run today. And I think that it was their faith in what we were doing and the experience that we had together at Parsec, which sort of led them to push us towards measurement.
Where do you reckon the trail of media metrics is headed over the next few years?
So I think that it's still very early with attention. I think there's still a lot of opportunity to use attention to drive outsized returns for brands. So the market is still inefficient. There's still lots of arbitrage to be had. But we just last week launched our first sell-side product with the New York Times as our first client, basically enabling publishers to understand how their media is rated in AU and give them a set of tools so that they can offer measurement and merchandise their higher quality inventory and act and sell it programmatically. So I think that what we'll start to see with attention metrics is the migration from only being used on the buy side for arbitrage and for sort of the single side of the market to seeing a market form around attention metrics and drive that trust that I was talking about.
I'd actually wanted to talk a little bit about the New York Times and Adelaide. It's a little bit like watching Batman team up with Superman. Now with the New York Times diving headfirst into Adelaide's attention metrics, it begs the question, what do you think sparked this collaboration?
So we'd spent the past 4 years helping brands understand the quality of the media they were buying. And a lot of that involved doing measurement with the publishers were involved with.
Right.
And we would constantly get questions about, how do I improve my AU score? That's a fine line to walk, right? We want the metric to be very credible and for the buy side to trust it. And so we can't just sell, we can't be open with the algorithm and how it's created. We can't give too much guidance to publishers and like how to game the metric. So really what we ended up with is, why don't we just sell them the data? Why don't we sell them the same information about their placements, which we're generating for the buy side? The New York Times has consistently outperformed benchmarks, and it may come as no surprise to you that there is a very strong predictor of how our meetings go with the sell side of the market, which is how do they do against benchmark. So when we talk to a publisher that does well, they're super receptive. And so it made sense for the New York Times. Like they very consistently outperform the market. They're a very premium publisher. And like any premium publisher, they're faced with a challenge of how do they represent that quality to the market, right? There's no metric today, right? Like the rise of MFA really is a great way to understand the struggle that premium publishers have, because there are publishers out there that do not respect the user experience. And those publishers are more...
I could think of one that just was exposed this week.
Is it one or is it a three that you're thinking of?
Which one?
Maybe WWW3, the WWW3 Forbes, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think this is and when we speak to the like larger publishers and more premium publishers, they're very excited about having metric that helps them demonstrate quality to the buy side that the buy side is, has already adopted. Pretty much every major holdco now uses AU in some shape. And so, for publishers, one of the things that the New York Times told us was the reason they chose AU is because there were so many brands coming to them saying like, this is the metric I trust.
Do you think we're going to look back and this is going to be a watershed moment in genuine engagement and attention?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting time in advertising. We're losing the identity signal that has been used for attribution and used for targeting. And there's, all sorts of interesting solutions that are being proposed. My hope is that by offering the industry a better understanding of actual media quality, they will become less reliant on invasive technology like attribution, right? And I think that it's human nature that if you don't understand the quality of the thing you're buying, to become fixated on understanding what it gets you. And so we can sort of unpack that and say, like, here, now you understand exactly the quality of the media you're buying, so you no longer need to do all this linking of everything that people see and everything they do.
Have you got any pushback about the value of attention from anyone?
Yeah, definitely. So there's always skepticism, and I think that it's justified around new ways of measurement. We work with all of our clients to run them through an A/B test that proves that when they use Adelaide or AU instead of viewability, that they drive more efficient incremental outcomes. That is always our North Star. So I think that attention is could be the ultimate vanity metric if it's not built with consideration and it's not done properly. So I think that there's justifiable skepticism around it. I think that there's a lot of people in the attention space that are focused on the duration of attention. And while that is like it works in the lab and it makes sense that you would think about measuring how long people are going to look at something or predict how long they're going to look at something. In practice, it ends up creating a lot of perverse incentives around creative and audience. So, when you go out and if you look at your campaign, go ahead.
Right. Oh, I'm saying, so how do you avoid what you had called before the Attentive Audience Paradox, where you navigate the murky waters of targeting the right audience without falling into the trap of preaching to the converted? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's the core problem that a lot of people are having with attention, is that this sort of first attempt that everybody makes. And we made it at Parsec. Like Parsec was selling media on a cost per second. So it was very, very duration focused. I think the problem is that people take that common sense approach. It's very easy to understand. It's like, we're going to just predict the amount of attention that people are going to spend with it. They don't take into account the incentives that it creates. And if you make metrics, it's literally your job to think about the incentives that metric is going to create on buyers and sellers in a market. And if I'm a seller in the market and I'm being held accountable to the duration of attention or to the maximum amount of attention, I'm going to serve the ads to older people because older people look like they spend more attention than younger people. In fact, even though every second of attention, when it's younger people have more impact per second of attention than older people, even though older people will spend more time with ads, it also creates weird incentives around creative, right? Like the creative that you will look at for the longest will be the most entertaining or interesting or engaging creative. And there's a tension there between how much branding is in creative. So you don't want the creative that's going to capture the most attention. You want the creative that's going to do the most work. And on the audience, back to the audience side, there's brands that you are aware of, you will pay more attention to their ads. And TVision actually released some interesting research that showed that the amount of attention goes up with frequency, up to 25 units of frequency. So when you optimize to the most attentive audience, you're going to skew older, you're going to skew over frequency, and you're also going to be optimizing towards people that already know about your brand, which is antithetical to the purpose of advertising in most cases. So I think that...
Is anyone playing with a weighted metric for...
Yeah, I think that's the answer that I typically get when I bring it up. But that's a really difficult thing to do, right? You need to understand what is the demographic distribution of everything.
Even more so with the loss of cookies,
Yeah,
even harder.
Precisely. So I think to your original question, the solution is to move beyond just like thinking about attention as this monolith and unpacking it and understand, how does attention impact media? How does it impact creative? And how does it impact audience? Or vice versa, how does creative impact attention? How does audience impact attention? And how does media impact attention? It's our position at Adelaide that media creates an opportunity for attention that creative capitalizes on. And then, if it resonates with somebody, then it will change the way they think or feel or act. And since media's job is to create that opportunity for attention, it makes sense to judge the quality of an opportunity using probability. So AU is a measure of probability of attention by any person to any creative in a placement, and then the subsequent probability of an outcome. Because advertising is not just about getting attention. It's about using that attention to drive outcomes.
Is there any outcome that you stumbled upon that you thought was really weird or surprised you?
Yeah, totally. So when we started, we wanted to make a fast-moving metric for brand advertisers. So what we heard from them was they would be running these brand lift studies where they would get the results 3 months after the campaign has ended. The next campaign is already launched. Half the cells aren't stat sig. And it's like, well, what do I do with this thing now? So we wanted to make a metric that was predictive of brand lift results. And that was the first versions of AU were very upper funnel focused. In fact, I won't say versions of AU, the first pitches and the first clients we worked with. And it worked really well. Like very consistently, we found that when you were optimizing using AU instead of using viewability, you were driving better awareness and better recall and all those other things. Now, we had one of our early clients who's a CPG came to us and said, I'm going to take this data and run it up against my NCS data, my lower funnel POS data. And we were pretty scared, right? We thought like, oh man, this is going to go poorly. It's going to be a bad look. If it's media quality, it should really work everywhere. And that's actually what ended up happening. Like it worked better at the bottom of the funnel in some cases than it did at the top of the funnel. And I think that in hindsight, it makes sense because media is just about amplifying or taking away from the creative. It's the conduit which the creative uses to reach the audience. And so if you have a high quality conduit, any type of creative will work. And so if you're looking to get people to vote or getting people to show up at a car dealer or getting people to know about a movie, like those things really are independent of the quality of the placement. Granted, contextual will always have an impact there or should have an impact there, but the placement quality is relatively independent of the type of outcome that you're looking to achieve.
If you had to sum up the future of attention metrics in one word, what would it be?
Marketplace. I think that, it's sort of a self-centered point of view, I guess, but I think with our release of Adelaide for publishers and helping publishers understand what is the quality of the media that they have, it will help sort of we will start to see a market form around AU.
So going a little bit back, you've gone from the ivory towers of Carnegie Mellon to the trenches of digital media. How did your scholarly past fuel your fire at Adelaide?
I wasn't that much of a scholar. I think Carnegie Mellon has a great reputation, which I leveraged, especially to find co-founders early on. In my first business, Sponge Cell,
right.
Several of my co-founders were from Carnegie Mellon. I think, CMU had a very interdisciplinary approach to things. And I think I've tried to learn from that in my career. A lot of what we do at Adelaide is inspired by commodities markets and other financial markets and trying to understand, even like the used car market. Like I think we take a lot of inspiration from what Carfax did in the used car market by just injecting a shared understanding of quality into the market. So I think that it's, my big takeaway from CMU is like take interdisciplinary approaches to things, take evidence-based approaches to things. I was a decision sciences major, which was sort of like an undergrad MBA. And so I think that was the takeaway.
What's one theory in decision sciences that completely backfired when applied?
And I don't have a good answer for this. Theory in decision sciences that completely backfired. If I was smarter about behavioral economics, I think I would probably have something to say there. But there's a lot of iffy behavioral economics stuff out there.
What from your college days is still in your toolkit, though? Any old relics that you refurbished for the digital age?
Things from my college days. I was so into like the internet and wireless security. I worked when I was in high school. I worked at a company called Public Access Unix in New York City. It was the first internet provider on the East Coast. It's like early 19. So and then in college, I was really focused on like hacking Wi-Fi networks and doing that kind of stuff. I got into advertising by accident.
You drove around with dialing and stuff? You drove around looking for a network?
So I
remember the 90s. I used to drive around with my laptop looking for an open...
Yeah, war driving. Yeah.
Wi-Fi,
Back when it was like, what was it? And they had like WEP. And so it was pretty easy to crack web keys. The company I worked for sold basically like a VPN that you'd run on your local network. So you didn't have to trust the sort of the network layer for any security. And so I would show up places and we would basically just hack their Wi-Fi network in a matter of minutes. Or it actually got a little bit harder as the industry progressed beyond web. But we would just prove to them how insecure it was, and then we would sell them, a better solution. So I did that for many years. And when I was in Pittsburgh, I tried to start a big public wireless network that never got off the ground. And then I worked for these wireless network security companies. And the second or third one I worked for gave me a PC. And they said, all right, now you should use Outlook to do your email and your calendar. And I had always been a Mac person ever since my first Lisa said, this is a horrible piece of software. I don't want to use this at all. So I got a couple of my buddies from Carnegie Mellon and we made a web calendar. It was like part of the Web 2.0 movement where all of these apps were being put into JavaScript and HTML and raised money from IPG. And we actually, I was 26, 27 years old, had no idea what I was doing, spent all of their money and went back to them and said, okay, well, now I'm ready for some more money. Can you please fund the company again? They said, that's not how it works. You need to actually make a product that people use and pay you for. You need an ongoing business or a viable business. And they suggested that we took a lot of this calendar technology that we built, put it into display ads. And that's sort of how I transitioned from the network world to the advertising world. And they were right. Their suggestion worked. We built a company. It was like about 100 people, maybe even a little bit bigger before it was acquired by Flash Talking. So yeah, I think the Futures Media Group at IPG made 2 investments, SpongeCell and Facebook. And I think we sort of averaged out their returns, but they were smart about what we should do with our business and the direction that they thought we should take it in. And that was how I got into digital advertising.
How do you keep your team at Adelaide Metrics in line with the ever-evolving scientific methods?
I think that we've hired a group of people that take a lot of pride in their work, and we give them a lot of latitude and a lot of agency to do work in their own way. And I think that if you hire smart people...
How do you foster... Right.
Just hire smart people and get out of their way.
How do you foster a culture of continuously learning?
I think that's the same thing. You allow it to happen. I think you hire people that want to learn and then you let them do that. I think it's really hard to train people to want to learn and to be curious. So we look for curiosity, we look for passion, we look for people that take pride in their work when we're recruiting, and then we just try to foster that. And when they're already in.
Has there been anything really gnawing at your brain cells these days? Anything juicy that might be electrifying or enlightening?
I think that the MFA conversation, I spent a lot of time thinking about that because the work that a lot of the companies are doing in the space is super important. There needs to be more investigation of how this low quality media is brought to market and why it's bought and why are these CPC, CPM arbitrage businesses, why do they exist? I don't think that maintaining a list of sites that are good and bad is really a great idea. I think that all impressions that humans see have some value. It's just the question is, what is the value? Typically, media is mispriced today. There's not a lot of data in price. You can't consistently say that higher priced media is higher quality media. And I think that if we repair that, so if we just pay a price which is commensurate with quality, a lot of these problems in the go away. I don't think we solve this with a spot solution. I think that we solve this with a broader economic solution where just like breaking the arb that these MFA sites conduct is probably a more long-term, sort of more stable solution.
How much is reach the problem behind this? Or the desire to have enormous reach?
Yeah, I think that the main problem is that people don't understand the various quality of reach, right? And the variant quality of reach. It used to be in media that reach was really homogenous, right? It was like there was only a few mediums you would buy on. And, TV, there was an equitable rotation. It was pretty consistent, when you bought a GRP, what you would get. And when you bought a magazine ad, what you'd get. In digital, it's become massively fragmented. So I think that the big problem isn't a focus on reach. Reach is incredibly important, and you can't build a brand without reaching consumers. It's just a lack of understanding of what is the variant quality of reach. And that leads to price not reflecting quality.
So how do you track? I'm always curious, how do you strike the right balance between data and intuition?
So we use intuition to start and data to finish. We use intuition, we say we use intuition to go down the path of attention. We thought attention was a better measure than viewability, but you use intuition to sort of set things up and to think about the problem and to pontificate. And then you use data to prove that the hypothesis is correct.
Regarding the future of, I want to talk a little bit actually about flight control. How do you envision it shaping the future of media planning?
So flight control helps advertisers understand what the quality of media they need to consistently achieve outcomes or to de-risk from the outcome not happening. it's a pre-planning tool. So what it does is it helps advertisers sort of figure out what their number is, and then they can bring that into the planning process and leverage our norm data, which helps them understand, for example, like if flight control tells you that you need a 27 for a specific campaign, then you can go into a planning tool that has AU norm data loaded into it and say, where can I find a 27? Right? So what websites, what placements are going to give me the quality of media that I need to consistently achieve my outcome? It also helps you go beyond just planning and measuring after the fact and asking for a guarantee. And I think advertising is a very unique marketplace. It's one of the few markets that I can think of where you might spend $10 million and then say, oh, I wonder what I got. Let me measure the viewability and the clicks and the outcomes from this campaign. Most markets, you transact using a metric which is a really close proxy for quality. And so there's a lot more certainty before the purchase is even made. And I think that with AU and with flight control, advertisers can have that same certainty. They can figure out what the number is they need, and then they can plan against it, but they can also buy against it. They can take it out to the market and they can demand a specific amount of quality, and they can get that, which then gives them a lot more confidence.
Do you think that's why partners like Havas Media and Group M have become partners with you? That specific, utility, I guess. Yeah. Sorry,
No,
I didn't have a word there for that.
No, I think that they see this as a way to drive better results for their
Right.
brands. I think that that's more like.
How do you plan to capitalize on this?
So I think by building a market around it, I think that we've proven to the buy side that they should trust AU, and we've built a very healthy business by servicing the buy side. And now we're going to take the same data and we're going to sell it to the sell side. And that creates a much more defensible business than just one side of the market use of your data.
So I've noticed that Mike Agvins from Magnite, he highlighted the success behind a lot of global brands using AU metrics in their auction packages. How do you think the AU metrics are reshaping the landscape of programmatic advertising? And what do you see as the new frontier in AU adoption?
Great question. So I think what we've started to see in the programmatic market is the price of high AU inventory is starting to increase, which means the market is becoming more rational. It's definitely not all the way there yet. There's still a lot of value to be had by using AU, but we're starting to see the price of high quality assets in the market correct, which is really, really exciting because like a more rational market will just be a more functional market in the long run. So it's great to see Magnite doing that. We have a lot of other partners like Hubmatic and Teads and sort of programmatic players, the Trade Desk and Google with DV all have our data. I think the next step in programmatic is really the integration of AU into bidding decisions. It's possible to use AU inside of custom algorithms on pretty much every DSP, but I think the next step is really going to be making it available in the default bidder as like you can tell the bidder, but you should utilize AU when you're making your bids. And that's effectively just titrating the bid up and down based on what the AU score is for an impression that the DSP has already decided to bid on. I think it's important that people know that they shouldn't the decision about price should not be solely based on media quality. There's a bunch of other factors that go into it. So this is really like when the bidder has decided that it's going to buy an impression, like what's the price that it should pay? And should it bid up or should it bid down? And I think that AU can be super valuable for that decision.
John Cheese sees an investment opportunity in attention space, likening attention metrics to a buried treasure waiting to be discovered. How do you think investors can capitalize on the growing interest in attention metrics? And what role do you see Adelaide playing in this evolving landscape?
Well, I think the best way for them to take advantage would be to invest in Adelaide. We have some really fantastic investors. I think Joe Marchese, who led our last round at Human Ventures, he has been thinking about this space for longer than I have. It's fun. We have Jonah Goodhart and Joe Marchese have both been working on attention for longer than me. And I think that Joe's approach is super interesting because before he got into the measurement side, he was actually acquiring underpriced assets through the lens of attention. So he had this fund called Attention Capital that was actually going around and acquiring media assets. So that's one way. I think that if you use
we're undervalued? That he felt we're undervalued, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think attention to understand like which publishers, when the market gets rational, right? Like when price does actually predict quality, like what is undervalued today and then will be properly valued in the future.
Why do you think this has not been expanded to social media, though? I mean, obviously, if we could gauge the attention metrics of people on influencer platforms, we'd have better metrics.
We rate social formats. I think there's a couple reasons why it's not more widely adopted in walled gardens and social. One is they don't have a lot of attention. A lot of the outcomes they drive are based on audience targeting. I think that the formats are much more uniform than they are outside of the walled gardens. Attentiveness to individual placements. There was some interesting research a couple weeks ago that came out from one of our competitors that showed that session depth was really predictive of attentiveness. And so you could build that one into like understanding the quality of media inside of a walled garden. But there's really only 4 or 5 placements that Facebook sells. So if you're using attention to judge the quality of placements, there's not a lot of variance that we've found so far. On YouTube and on I'll say in feed-based environments, it's hard to use context to predict attentiveness because really the ad exists on its own. Maybe, like I said earlier, you can use session depth or like how long someone's been in the app. But when you're dealing with pre-rolls or mid-rolls inside of YouTube, the genre or the context is super predictive. So I think that we'll start to see genre being used inside of walled gardens where it's applicable.
In the world of consumer data, what role does Adelaide play, and how are you keeping it clean?
Yeah, we don't touch audience data at all. We don't use it in like the training of our models. We'll bring in a lot of outcome data and a lot of exposure data from opted-in panels, but I think that in a lot of ways, the industry's fixation on attribution is an artifact of broken currencies. The example I often give is if you went to a gas station and you tried to buy 10 gallons of 92 octane gas and the guy said, sorry, all I have are buckets of gas, you'd behave very similarly to an advertiser. You would try to pay them on cost plus. Like you'd say, let me pay you 10% more or 20% more than that bucket of gas cost you, which in the long run sets up the principal agent problem perfectly and creates an incentive for that gas station to pay more for gasoline and not deliver you more value by paying less and passing along the savings to you. But you'd also set up an attribution system in your car. You would try to figure out you try to reverse engineer what the value of that bucket is by understanding how far it drove your car and what are the other impacts that were contributing to your car moving, right? What was your tire pressure? Were your windows up or down? Was your AC on? What was the humidity? All of, like the health of your sparks and how many other passengers you had, all of the other things that would influence that outcome. And we do, that's what happens in advertising, right? We do these massive studies, but the downside is that when you do it with your car, you're just a weird person that tracks your car. When you do it in advertising, it's the wholesale privacy invasion of 300 million people, right? So it's tracking everything people see online and everything they do afterwards. Personally, I think that's sort of gross, but the solution is not coming up with another identifier. The solution is solving the problem at its core and giving advertisers in the whole market a much better picture of media.
What's your take on the idea that less personalization might actually be more?
100% agree with that, right? The things that drive our culture are shared experiences. The things that we remember the most are things that everybody else also saw. And the way that brands work is by having people, if you were the only person that understood the value of a Mercedes, it wouldn't have any value, right? Most of the time people like brands because of the qualities that they imbue on them, and that requires other people to have a shared experience. So I think that personalization overall is probably overhyped, and there's plenty of research that proves that personalization is a net negative.
So what are the most exciting innovations in ad tech that have you on the edge of your seat right now?
The most exciting innovation in ad tech.
You ever get worried that these new toys might just complicate things?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of what happens in ad tech. I'm not a huge fan of dynamic creative, not a huge fan of audience targeting. I think the rise of context, or I don't know if it's the rise or the reinvigoration of context, is super interesting. I think that overall, the shift to an evidence-based mindset away from a narrative-based mindset is really notable. And what I mean by that is a lot of the measurement historically has been narrative-based. You need your ads to be viewable for them to work. Or, brand safety is the worst one. Brand safety is mostly made up. There's never been someone who has seen an ad for an automaker next to a car crash and think, that automaker promotes, like sponsors car crashes, I'm not going to buy it. In fact, the most effective media on premium publishers is non-brand safe media. So I think that shifting away from this like mindset of this narrative-based approach to one that's more evidence-based is probably the most exciting thing that's happening in ad tech for me.
So shifting a little bit, steering Adelaide through its startup phase must have felt like herding wild horses. What's a hard-won lesson you'd pass on to the next generation of ad tech pioneers?
I've never herded wild horses, so I don't know exactly how that feels. But I was like, if you can compete with with people who have research backgrounds, it's a pretty good market to be in because they're not very good at customer service and they do a really good job educating the market. So we're in a space where we're competing with companies that are like driven by research people, and they, it's tough because they're a lot smarter than I am in a lot of ways, but they're not very good at product and they're not very good at customer service. So I would say find a market that's dominated by researchers and build a customer centric company to compete with them. I would also say stay away from personal data.
Go ahead, sorry.
I would just say stay away from personal data.
Confess to us, what did you scarf down for breakfast today? Are we talking 5-star nutrition or coffee and existential dread?
It's the latter. I've been on this one meal a day, like long intermittent fasting for a while to try to get rid of my COVID. It's working pretty well, I think. I think I'm swimsuit ready by any means, but I'm doing a lot of fasting and enjoying the benefits from that.
Is there a go-to drink or comfort meal for you?
An adult happy meal, a martini and a burger.
Like you go to McDonald's with your martini?
No. There's a lot of great burger spots where I live, and I'm like right in between Lower East Side and Chinatown in Manhattan, and so I would love.
I used to live on Grand Street.
I'm right there.
I used to live in that area. I used to live on 5B Grand. So I'm not far from there.
Right around the corner.
I love that area.
Lots of good food.
There's like some of the old Italian delis are still there from like 100 years ago, and the Jewish delis, and then there's the Donut Factory. I love that place.
Right on. Is it Grand? Like right up the street from me. Yeah.
Yeah, it is on Grand.
I recently discovered Faro's, which I think is one of the old Italian places that you're talking about.
Well, yeah, there's a Italian deli there. If you have to get your ticket, and if you're not ready, they kick you out. I forgot what the name of it is. It's like one of those old-fashioned delis. So, reflecting on a beast of a challenge you faced down, how did you slay it?
Oh, the beast of the challenge. I think the biggest challenge that we've I won't say we've slayed it yet, but that we face is the inertia behind existing ways of doing business and advertising. The focus on cost and cheaper CPM. So that takes a while to unpack and unwind because the incentives are set very high up in the brand. Typically the CEO might have hired Bain or BCG to set the comp up of the CMO and the VP of media. And for a long time, it's been about how lowering CPMs, make sure that you have high brand safety, no fraud, high viewability, lowest CPM possible. And that incentive trickles all the way down through the ecosystem, and unwinding that and getting people to focus on quality and then computing value is a challenge, but I think that it's one that we're excited to attack.
Before we go, I like to ask people if you could send yourself a time-traveling text message to yourself when you start in the industry, what would you tell yourself and would you listen to yourself?
Buy more Bitcoin and yes. But about the industry, I would say spend more time thinking about and understanding incentives because it was really frustrating coming from a very logical, everything made a lot of sense in computer security and in computer networks. I did not spend enough time early on understanding how incentives were set up in the industry. So I would say focus on that and buy more Bitcoin.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Adelaide Show. We've taken a thrilling ride through the ever-evolving landscape of digital advertising with the incomparable Marc Guldimann. We've unraveled the mysteries of attention metrics, debunked outdated ad standards, and even pondered the sartorial choices of our guest. Marc, you've been a mensch. A colossal thank you to our sponsor, Troutman Amin LLP, the law firm that keeps the lights on and the lawsuits off. Their support allows us to keep bringing you the unvarnished truth, with a side of humor and a dash of irreverence. Remember, in this fast-paced world of digital media, staying ahead means keeping that edge. Stay curious, stay bold, and know more than you did yesterday.